All right, why don't we go ahead and get started. This is Eric Weichert. I'm a partner here at Cornerstone Advisors. This phone and this line is actually being recorded as well as the WebEx. So if you want to access it into the future after this meeting, Lynette will send you out a WebEx link as well so you can see the recorded message as well. On the phone with me, I have Michelle Gothen, Lynette Harris, as well as Thomas Malillo. And on behalf of Cornerstone, we just want to thank everybody for participating in the 2019, what we're calling the performance survey. In the past, it's been the Cornerstone report. We are very excited that we have actually been spending some money listening to our clients, and we have actually created what's called the Performance Vault. And so for some of you longtime participants, and I know a lot of you are on the line. In fact, First Trust, I don't know if you're on the line or not, but you get the award for participating 7 times since I believe 2000, it was early 2000s. So thank you very much. And I know we have a lot of longtime participants on the line. So without you all, this would not be possible. So again, thank you very much. Real quick, I did want to, I don't want to spend a lot of time, but I did want to kind of just give you a feel for what the Performance Vault is at the beginning here. Lynette's going to come on, talk about a timeline as well as some of the key milestones as you all go through this process. They'll be very similar to in years past, and I know we do have some new participants as well, so want to make sure folks understand the process from here. Talk about immediate next steps, talk about some of the nuances about how to fill out some of the data requests, things like that, and then provide you some contact information. At the end, we'll have time for Q&A as well. And of course, Lynette, myself, and Thomas are all available for any questions that you have throughout the process. So again, want to thank everybody for participating, and why don't we go right in. So first off, what is the Performance Vault? And really the Performance Vault and why we created it is so that we could have, give our clients or give banks power at your fingertips as far as getting data real time, seeing your scorecards real time, also, you know, looking to what's changed in the industry. And so we've created what's called the Performance Vault. Now, what you see here is very similar to what we've used in the years past. Now, for some of you long timers, we used to use Excel spreadsheets, and it was a real hassle. So we have updated that. But our goal here, and what you'll see in this platform, is actually a way for you all to look at your scorecards real time and not just a PowerPoint that we send you. So for participating in 2019, we actually are going to be giving you this platform free for the entire year. So up until December 31st, 2019. And so in this platform, you'll see different sections: retail, commercial, and operations. And by the way, this operations is kind of operations and administration as well. So you see some of the administration, finance and accounting, HR, things like that in here as well as some of the operations functions. But you'll see all your scorecards, all your data basically at your fingertips. So if I went in here, I've completed my surveys, and I wanted to just take a quick look at what my mortgage lending scorecard looks like, you can do that, right? And so just click on it, and it'll show you kind of your value for all of the metrics. And by the way, we built out these scorecards a little different than what we had in the past. And so we're doing some things a little different. One is because we're big fans of a balanced scorecard approach, we're actually giving you access to not only staffing metrics, but revenue and expense metrics, as well as some service and convenience metrics. And we're building these out over time. So we envision these scorecards to continue to be very rich in kind of decision making and things like that, that really help you to make those informed decisions. So you'll get to go in here, see your value, and this is really the value created by the inputs that you have, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll get to see these targets, and these targets are actually set by you all. And so every bank's a bit different as to what they want to do. Some may say, hey, we're in growth mode, and we actually don't necessarily want to set our goals at the high performer because we have 5 new loan officers, right? And so we're in growth mode. So maybe we say, you know what? We're going to set these targets a little lower because we're in that growth mode, et cetera. So it gives you the ability to do that. It also, by the way, gives you the ability as a manager of mortgage to say, well, what do we need to do from our staffing? So because we set this level, this target of 188, and we're performing right now at 209, what does that mean for me? Well, it means that, you know, as a manager, I actually need to add to my staff, right? So I have 23.89 mortgage FTE when I actually need 26.6. So give some tools on both sides of the equation. Now, similarly, right, if we set this target pretty high, so that's why it's important to really, you know, think strategically about these targets. We actually need to reduce staff, right, to get to that target of 2.5 from 23.89 to 20. We could also do this, by the way, by raising our volumes. So instead of having 50 mortgage loans a month, we could actually have 60, right? So if we grew our mortgage business by 10, we actually would be okay with the 23.89 FTE in those buckets. So I didn't want to go into too much detail on this, but it really like the platform in that it gives you real-time access to peer data, allows you to set targets. And real quick here, we're going to have all kinds of different queries here we can build. For banks over 10 billion, by the way, we'll have, you know, a group there that you can see real time. You know, we might, instead of just doing all banks here, we might want to look at all banks that have an efficiency ratio under 65% or under 60%. So we're building these out right now, and they're just queries into the database. So you'll be able to make any type of, you know, selections there based upon, you know, what you'd like to see in the individual scorecards as well. Real quick, before we go into too much detail, I wanted to show you, this is where you all are going to go in and your teams are going to go in to input the information. So very similar like years in the past. We make it very clear on what we're talking about here when we're talking about mortgages. Yes, we're talking first only, not seconds. We can include home equities, for example, in the consumer lending community. So we try to make it very clear. We also have some balance, some checkpoints in here, meaning if I entered a number in here that didn't make sense because of the other data I have, so for instance, I already put 60 approved loans in here a month, and I went in and tried to change this to 50, well, clearly you can't have you know, a smaller amount of applications than you do approved, right? Because you have to have an application in order to deny it or approve it. So that number has to be higher. And by the way, we're using monthly averages here. So as you guys put your data together, you'll see as we look at the questions, average number. Typically when we're asking for average number, we're asking average number, and this one says per month. So the idea is we probably want to take the last 12 months or all of 2018, frankly, if we're looking at 2018 data from 12/31, right, and averaging the monthly. Now, we are also looking for run rates here. So if you have some anomaly, contact center sometimes comes up where you have an anomaly to say, oh, we went through an online banking conversion and we had 5 times the number of calls in March and 3 times in April and 2 times in May. Maybe we kind of take that data and massage it a bit to say, here's what our true run rate is if we're looking for calls. So back to the mortgage side, you're right. We actually have 70, not 50. It clears those alerts up, and we have those alerts built throughout the system because, as you know, we're big fans of kind of making sure that we have clean data in the database throughout this process. So wanted to give you just a quick highlights of the performance fault. Lynette's going to now talk about the schedule and some other things as we go through allocations, different things like that. But really excited about the performance fault, giving you all access to it as well, in managing performance. So with that said, Lynette, would you like to talk about the schedule?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for that preview. That was awesome. That you've covered some points that we have further along in the slideshow, so that might cut down the time on this call. So that's good. I just wanted to briefly mention the milestones. Typically, it's a process where we're going back and forth. Today's like the kickoff call, and then we'll open next week. We'll open up the online surveys that Eric was showing you, where you can start filling in information. But we do have a resource page, which I'll show you on another slide too, but we have a resource page where you can pull down PDFs of the survey sections, so you can start gathering your information now. You don't have to wait till next week when the online opens up. So we have the kickoff. So the month of May, we'll be putting in that information into the database, and then we look it over, and there'll be a May, June, part of July possibly, where we're going back and forth and just making sure the information is clear. Like Eric showed you, the new piece that some of past participants haven't seen before is that you'll be able to see the scorecard right away. You're not necessarily having to wait for us to come back and say, does that look right to you? And go back and edit your surveys to make sure that your data is accurately representing your bank. So that will show up in the beginning. What you'll see is the survey like you have in the past, and deal with just the survey part. And then we'll open up that other side to see the scorecard once you've submitted your first information. Then you will get a scorecard that shows like Eric showed online. You'll get that scorecard, and you get a free consultation call. And then you'll have access to play more with that new platform till the end of the year. So
and just real quick on that, I just wanted to kind of reiterate. So instead of using PowerPoint and copying and pasting your scorecards in, as we work with you, one of the other things you get free with participating is a consultant kind of hour to kind of talk through your results with you. And so we'll be using the performance platform to kind of talk about what we're seeing out there in the industry as far as best practices, as far as where people are setting targets and why they are, some of the kind of the nuances, if you will, of setting high performance in staffing metrics, or where we're seeing some of the revenue opportunities out there, because all of our consultants are in hundreds of banks a year, and again, just kind of wanting to show and share best practices with you all. So we'll be using this platform as well to kind of be walking through your results with you and your teams. Sorry, Lynette.
Oh, no problem.
Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, we have a Q&A section at the end. You're free to go ahead and submit your questions throughout the meeting as well. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that.
Good point.
Okay.
All right. I think we're done with this slide.
Okay. So at the end of the day, by September, we feel pretty good that you should have, even August, have some pretty good data in your scorecards, that we should have a good data set from all the participants. And by the way, we're looking for about 50 banks this year. We're well over half right now, and we're continuing to grow that. We would appreciate anything that you all could do to reach out to any of your peers, by the way. We've already had a few folks ask if it was okay, and of course it is. The more the merrier, frankly, in this survey. So if you need any help as far as getting some of the details of how to participate or anything, Lynette's happy to send those to you as well.
Good point.
Okay. So as we talk, one of the things that always comes up is time commitments that you all need and your folks need. And as you know, we're big divide and conquer kind of folks. And so what we would suggest is, at the end of the day, it's about 5 hours for each of those areas that you saw on the previous scorecard. You may have some folks at your banks that actually are in charge of multiple communities. Just know this, when we ask for information, we're not asking for information that we don't believe managers need to know or they don't need to know to manage that business line. So the information in most cases is probably already tracked. We would say if it's not, it probably should be. And so in those cases where you don't have some data tracked that we're asking for, I would say educated guesses and obviously pulling some custom reports, that average time for survey completion might be actually 2 to 3 hours. So I want to be upfront on a lot of this is pretty simple stuff like how many calls you get in the contact center or how many deposit accounts you have. Some things that get a little tricky sometimes are, I'm in the cards and payments community and I want to know how much I'm making in interchange on a PIN transaction versus SIG transaction. Now, frankly, guys, we think you need to know that to run your payments business. However, you know, the vendors out there don't always do a really good job of making that easy. And so there are some areas where it's going to get a little trickier. At the end of the day, you know, what's the resource requirement? It does depend kind of on where you are in each of your areas as far as kind of the details of the data and understanding the data. But, you know, frankly, it's not over. I mean, we could be conservative here and say 8 hours, and I can't imagine it's over that for the full process over the next 4 or 5 months. Sorry, Lynette, I stole your thunder, I know.
No, you covered that well.
Okay. You want to talk about survey takers and users?
Yes. So what we've established, excuse me, is having a project coordinator or survey coordinator on your end, and you're basically most likely the people sitting in the room right now. And you will be my main contact, I'm your main contact, so that we can go back and forth. It's usually more efficient that way, that people within your bank funnel their questions to you, and then you can talk to me. But I'm open for all questions. I'm here to support you.
Speaking of questions, Lynette, I think there is one question that popped up.
I answered the one question. There was a question that asked, as a project coordinator, will I receive a link next week to access the vault and input the answers? So the answer to that is yes, you will. That's when we will open it up. I will send you an email with details on how to log on to the survey website. And also, I will send you, if you don't already have the link to the resource page, I will send you a link to the resource page, and that has a user guide on it. So it explains how to navigate through the survey system and many of the questions on the online tool. So
great, thanks, Lynette, and thanks, Madeline, for the question.
So with this slide, in that guide will also show more detail how to do this, but what will happen is your bank will be assigned to the survey, and then I will assign you as the project coordinator so you can oversee everything that's going on with the survey process in your bank. And you then can assign the survey takers, and there could be more than one survey taker for each section, and you can pretty much, it's self-explanatory when you get on there, but I will have details on how to do that in an email, and you can also get it in the guide. So it will just be a matter of you assigning each section to someone to fill out. And there is one section that you don't have to fill out or assign to anyone, and that is a corporate overview. And basically that is information that we will pull from public records, the FDIC, and we will input that for you, so that will save you time on that. The rest of the surveys, you know, we can't pre-fill. It's really that kind of information that only you know. So this is just explaining that you will be responsible for filling out, assigning who will be filling out the different sections.
And got a quick question from Mark Hutchinson about how many banks right now are between 1 and 5 billion. And before everybody asks their question of what about 5 to 10 and 10 to plus, We're about 50% in that 1 to 5, and then another 20 to 30% in the 5 to 10, and then we have a few under $1 billion, and then we have about 7 right now over 10 billion, and so we're looking to grow all of those categories over the next week or two. Good question.
Okay. Thank you.
Go to the next slide.
Yeah, next slide.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe
right.
that Thomas was going to speak to these.
Yeah. So, yep. This is Thomas here. So I'll touch on this, and really we'll spend just a quick minute here since you got the rundown live from Eric. He went through some of these. So all the surveys sections going to be formatted the same way. On the right hand side there, under each of the actual questions are include, excludes, what we want to either be included into, whether it's volume, staffing, types of activities into that question, or excluded. And then on the left-hand side, all of our questions. I'm not sure, I know Eric had mentioned our time frame for the data, so won't touch on that. One thing, just so that as you do go through, we do have skip logic included in here. And so if you do see on this screen, at least when we're looking at 11, 12, and 13, basically this participant didn't outsource any portion of their contact center. So once they clicked that, it X'd out, it crossed out these other questions. So just some of that functionality. Other than that, I think Eric did a good rundown of this slide, so don't need to spend any more time. If there are questions as you go through again, reach out to Lynette, myself, or Eric.
Yep, and there's no right or wrong answer. We would just suggest that we've got to have a good, kind of game plan or definition of these. And then, hey, let's talk about exceptions along the way, as I mentioned, whether it be some sort of conversion that you did mid-year or what have you. Let's not just put data in that nobody trusts or really cares about. We're really looking at, okay, what's our monthly run rate or end of year data that we can use to make informed decisions and that make sense to everybody. So staffing as well as volumes as of 12/31/2018 is what we're looking at there. Okay, want to talk real quick about functional approach,
great.
Thomas?
Yep, definitely. So this is a pretty important point here, and we'll take a little bit of getting used to for folks who haven't done this before. But basically, Cornerstone takes a functional approach to allocating employee time, and what this allows us to do is to ensure that when we are creating these metrics and scorecards for each of the lines of business, that we're comparing you guys on an apples to apples basis between all the participants on the line here, and then kind of furthermore just for all of the basis of all of our benchmarking clients and participants. So what that really means, right, the functional approach is that we are truly concerned with the activities and the roles and the time that is being spent on these by our employees, rather than simply relying on their job title. So on this screen, if we take a look at Julie, our underwriter, now she is spending part of her time on direct consumer loans, vehicle, RV, student loans, things like that, underwriting those types of loans. And then she also does spend a portion of her time on first mortgages. What we need to break out there is the fact that we've got a consumer category for underwriting and mortgage. In this case, it seems she's focusing more on the consumer side. So we've got about 45% of her time in that bucket, 15% in mortgage underwriting.
Hey, Tom, and real quick, Thomas.
One more. Yeah.
Sorry. Just let me interrupt because, by the way, you guys, if I could put my exclamation points on the screen and sounds, etc., everybody pay attention to this because it's so important. Because if you don't do this and have a functional approach, none of your data will be apples to apples with the rest of the participants. So it's not your titles that you're looking at, it's what people do. And Cornerstone has over 200 functions that we've defined at your bank, right, in banking. And so because Julie's an underwriter and she happens to be an underwriter in the mortgage department, it doesn't mean that she's 100% allocated to mortgage underwriter, because in fact, Julie's, you have in Julie's bank, she has home equity lending in mortgage. And this is to my point earlier, home equities go in consumer, and we're not saying you need to move it within your banks. We're just saying, as we've defined it at Cornerstone, it goes into the consumer lending bucket. And so we've got to make sure that the allocations match what people do, not what their title is. So this is where the biggest challenge you all will have, especially for the new folks out there, in allocating your staffing, because it is a bit of a different way of looking at it. As you can imagine, every bank we work with has a different org chart. And so if we tried to do it by title, you couldn't tie the work with the staffing. And so our goal is to functionally define these categories. So these are two simple examples, but I want to make sure everybody's paying attention here, because this is very important. And by the way, we also have a link out with Steve Williams, one of my other partners here at Cornerstone, who kind of put together a video on allocations as well that I would suggest everybody watch as well. But it's really important, and that's why Lynette, myself, and Thomas are here to answer any questions you have, because we would rather you ask the question than take a guess. Again, sorry, Thomas, to interrupt, but if there's one slide to pay attention to in this hour, it's this one.
Yep. No, and that's great. A lot of great information there, Eric. Thanks. Yep. And just quickly on the operations specialist, to note here, right, they're spending a good half of their time in this case on customer debit support, this tier 2 function of advanced debit card questions. So that's actually going to be flowing into the card scorecard when we get down the line and creating our scorecards. Whereas then when we look at our wires and account maintenance, these are in our deposit operations area. And, you know, a lot of ops specialists kind of have these different roles, but those functions are then going to show up on our deposit operations scorecard. So if you click to the next slide, Eric, just a few more things to note for the folks here. So what's going to be very important is to make sure that, right, we're following our functional approach and breaking out time that way, but also that across our different lines of business and departments, we're not missing time that people are spending on functions that may not be, you know, quote unquote in our department or community. And then also that we're not double counting people. So that's to say, kind of in the mortgage example here, we're pulling this through. So we've seen participants really find it helpful sometimes to set up just a pretty basic spreadsheet, get all of our allocation categories at the top, and then all of our folks, our employees and positions along the columns here, and really however you guys like to set it up. But it's really just putting together this grid to help us work through. All right, Jane is spending about 80% of her time managing this group that's under her. She does hold a portfolio, putting a little bit of time in there. And then, you know, at a certain dollar threshold, she's the one underwriting these mortgages. So we needed to split her time out into those 3 different buckets. One other point to note on this slide is kind of going back to our functional approach, right, is that even if people are doing jobs or activities that are outside of that survey section, say mortgage here, we need to make sure that we're not missing that time. So we've got our support specialist here, and it's a support analyst in the mortgage group, and they're doing some of our post-closing processing secondary, but here's the key. They are also acting as an IT business analyst. They are writing some reports out of the mortgage LOS system, and they are doing some of the querying for the group, things like that, really IT-specific work. We want to capture half of their time there, make sure that we're not missing it. Now, that is going to flow through our IT scorecard. So it's important then to note down the line of, okay, we are a little heavy or we're a little light in these functions. And is that perhaps because we, have the group centralized, decentralized? Starts to bring up some of these different questions that we can dig into. So just really important there. Any
good job, Thomas. And just yeah, great point. And so I just went into the performance vault, went down to mortgage loan processing, for example, and you see how clear we are here. Like all these functions within the mortgage group, ordering appraisals, title, flood, clearing underwriting conditions, gathering data to complete, the loan file, things like that, all of that go into this processing. Whereas if I looked at underwriting, it'd be a little bit different, right? And so you have all these definitions of what to include and what not to include. So you kind of have to kind of put the two together and allocate accordingly. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Yep. And then Eric even had touched on some of this going through the performance vault, but just some things to monitor the progress and also see if there's things we need to take a second look at, right? So left-hand side just gives us a sense of how close we're getting to completing these surveys. So as the project coordinator, kind of helping to understand, are we tracking towards completion? Are there certain areas we need to follow up on? And then
that's
more importantly,
below each of the communities.
Yep.
If you see here. Yep. Go ahead. Sorry.
And then our validation that we've worked on. So here's another great example. Eric went through one, but one of our questions on the survey is total number of new deposit accounts. And then a subsequent one is, of those new deposit accounts, how many we're checking? This person put in more 6,000 for the checking account number and then 5,200 for the new deposit account number. All right, probably can't have more checking accounts than all of our total new deposit accounts. Let's flag that. So you'll start to see those come up as people put in some data, and they can follow up on or directly go address some of those questions or data issues.
Thanks, Thomas.
Yep. All right. And Eric, did you want me to go through this slide as well? Happy to.
Yeah, I mean, so just so y'all know, I mean, you saw the scorecards within the platform. All of those functional areas that that we have here, all have scorecards with them. If you go into any one of them, we'll just go into digital banking for the heck of it. You'll see up here median, a low performer, which is typically the 25th percentile, but not always. There might be some categories where actually the low performer, because the number's better to be lower, is actually the 75th percentile in the data set. So you can see where if it says low performer versus high performer, it's typically, depending on the number, it might be better to be lower, like efficiency ratio or things like that. So the peer data and then all of the metrics are beside that in all the communities. So you can kind of, we'll walk through the scorecards with you all, but you'll have access again online to all of this. Okay. Resources. Lynette, you want to talk about resources real quick?
Right. So there is a website, and if you don't have a link to that website, please let me know, and I'll make sure you get that, because here's where that video that Eric mentioned that Steve Williams put together that talks about the FTE allocation. It's just a really brief, good video on allocating FTE. And we also have all the PDFs of each section of the survey so that you can download those and start looking at those, what to include, what to exclude in each question, and figure out who would be the best person to assign to certain sections. And then the performance survey participant process, that is that guide that will step you through how to navigate when you're in the survey, and how to set up the survey takers and all the information that you need there. So, and what will happen going forward, once you start filling out the surveys and have questions, all questions that come to me, I put them in a frequently asked question, a weekly frequently asked question that I will post here and also email to you so that you can go through that and see if you had similar questions that are answered in that document. So I think that's it for this one, but just let me know if you don't have that link, and we'll make sure that you get that.
Good, and then here is all of our contact information. Lynette, her email and phone number, my email and my cell phone, and Thomas's, as well as his phone number as well. We, again, appreciate the time. I know we're done a little bit early, so hopefully we can get some time for to answer some more questions. But really excited again about this study and the data collection process. So with that being said, let's open it up to questions.
So I see there was one question about open unfilled positions. So we do want you to include the budgeted open positions that you have available. And I don't know if, Thomas, you want to go into more detail on that, or Eric?
Yeah, I can go real quick. Just we want to make sure that we're not missing folks. I would say, you know, temp positions sometimes comes up. Whether you include temporary positions, we would say, again, to that same point, if this is truly a position and you hired a temp because you have an open position and you just haven't filled it, we want to include that. We don't want to include seasonal temps, especially like college students and things like that. But we definitely, if it's a truly an open position and budgeted that you're looked at actively, you know, recruiting for it, we definitely want it. Great question. What else? Any other questions? We have about 20 minutes left, so happy to answer anything else you might have. Give it a few more seconds. Well, so we're available to answer any of your questions. You will have questions. If you don't personally, you will, your team will, over the course of the next 3 to 4 months. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Lynette does a great job of getting back to you in a timely manner. And if she doesn't have the answer, she'll get you the answer. She'd be your first point of contact. Myself and Thomas are available as well. And again, we would appreciate any help y'all could do in recruiting. And Lynette, why don't you go ahead and post that on that website as well, that link. Go ahead and post, you know, the documentation that each of the folks have received as far as how to participate, and that way they can get that and send it to the folks.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. And Lorraine, I see a question about, are these materials available to assist with internal meetings? So when you say these materials, I'm assuming you're talking about the video, Steve's video, this video, etc. So Lynette, how could they access this link? And I know they can access Steve's link, but I just want to make sure Lorraine understands that.
So there'll be the link to the resource page, and that does have all these, everything that we talked about on there. So I'm not quite sure what else.
What's the link? Do you know the link, Lynette?
Not off the top of my head, but I could.
Is it an easy link, or is it something that you have to copy and paste in?
I think it's an easy one. I'll have to look that up.
Okay. Well, we'll post that link for everybody so they have it. But that's something will all be available on that resource page, Lorraine.
And I'll follow up with an email that gives you a link to this presentation that you can share with other your survey team if you wish to do that, and then it will have the link to the resource page too.
Great. Good. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you all for the time today, and look forward to working with you over the next few months.
Thank you, everyone.